One of the universal laws is we can't really create true abundance if we're not living in healthy self-interest. It's not that the opposite of humility is cockiness. It's confidence. And when we're confident, we're beyond ourselves. We're just in true service. Like we're in that divine alignment with our purpose.
Thank you so much for coming today. I'm so excited to have you here because I've seen your videos and you have such inspirational messages through it. And so you help business entrepreneurs have a success mindset, right? Through your coaching. So I would love to hear first to dive right into it. What are some similar characteristics you've noticed about some great entrepreneurs?
Great question. I feel like so many men innately, when they want something, they just fucking make it happen, right?
Yeah.
But I think with women, we're kind of taught to be a little bit more passive in the way that we create or go after what we want to have. Mm-hmm. And so something that I've really niched down is I'm working with more empathic women who are wanting to create a big legacy, a big mission, get out there with their voice, but there's all these limiting beliefs and barriers that kind of hold them back behind the scenes. And so some common things that I've seen is not wanting to outshine people or fear of what other people think. And I think that plagues women a little bit more than men.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And what have you seen do over the years? You've probably also been around some successful business people that have done well. What are some characteristics that you're like, okay, they have this usually? Is there something similar you've noticed?
Yeah, I feel like one of the biggest things is when people are like, I'm not going to use my past to dictate where I'm going or what I want to do. And then I think another thing is just not listening to people around you, because normally when you're starting something new, as you probably know, with this podcast or anything that you've created, is people think you're crazy at first. People are like, that's so stupid. And if you can kind of tune that out and be a little delusional, that goes a really long way with entrepreneurship.
That's true. I was going to say I get that way when I get really excited about an idea. I'm like, no one can tell me it's a bad idea. I'll sell it to the moon. But then sometimes I get really excited about something, and then sometimes when time goes by, I start to second guess certain things. And I think that's something that happens to people, is maybe you start to second guess yourself. Am I good enough for this? And things like that. How do you overcome situations of self-doubt after you have an idea that maybe inspired you, but now you're pulling back?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think whenever something's really vulnerable or it's our next level of visibility, that's usually where we second guess ourselves. So a lot of people can kind of go for it at some point and create something. But I think when we're starting to self-doubt, it's usually something that we really deeply care about. It's something more vulnerable, more authentic to our soul. And so instead of seeing this as oh, this is bad, I'm not sure, we want to see this as oh, actually, this is something that I care more about. And this is an even deeper reason to pursue it versus letting that dictate the show.
I love that. That's so powerful.
Yeah.
It's so powerful for people to hear. Yeah. If you're feeling fear, it's because you care about it more, which means you need to go to run after it.
It's more your deeper purpose.
Yes.
It's going to feel more vulnerable.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah. So kind of putting yourself in a space of knowing these are normal feelings that are going to come up.
Yeah.
And working through it.
So much of it is being able to carry the shadow side along for the ride. Right? Wow. So it's the fear, the doubt, if that can just hang out in the passenger seat, we don't even need to get rid of it or just even reframe the way we see it, right? So this is a sign of expansion. This is a sign I'm getting closer to my soul, my calling, my deeper purpose. And then it allows us to see it from sort of a higher lens than letting that fear run us.
That's huge. What would you see as a poor mindset of someone that wants to be an entrepreneur? You've probably coached a lot of people, and it's something you probably see a lot of similarities. What are some of those?
Yeah, I love this. I feel like the number one thing I see is an excuse, right? And this usually comes in the form of comparison. So being oh, well, you have it easier. You're beautiful. You have a beautiful home. You probably had to go through a lot to get to where you're at, right? So a lot of people see people at the finish line and they assume that they just had it easier. And I get it. There's privilege exists. I know the privilege in my life. I recognize that. We all don't start from the same point, but that mindset and that attitude caps everything.
For sure.
So the reframe would be like, all right, if that person did it, I can do it. If like, doesn't matter where we start from or what we have. It's like that, the ability to be like, if someone else is doing it, it's in the realm of possibility. And then even better would be like, I'm going to do it better and do it faster and, you know, make it more my thing. So I think a lot of people make excuses for why they're not doing something. And that comes out in the form of comparison, thinking that other people had it easier.
What would you say is the difference between, because I was talking about this the other day, fear of failure and fear of failure and I guess fear of success?
Yeah.
Like, what would you say is the difference there?
Great question. So the fear of failure usually comes back to a self-perception that we have about ourselves. We're afraid that it's going to affirm some sort of unworthiness. Whereas the fear of success usually comes in the form of like a loss of some sort. So it's like losing your freedom or feeling more overwhelmed, or that you're going to get to some pinnacle place and maybe it'll ruin the partnership, or you'll lose something along the way. So one is usually like affirming some sort of core belief about who we are. And the other is usually what we think success we have to sacrifice along the way to get there.
That's true. I got told not too long ago, because I've been going to therapy, that I have the fear of success, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Because I never really, I was like, well, what does that even truly mean? But yeah. And then I do get afraid to lose things. I'm like, trying to hold on.
What is the thing that you've pinpointed? Is it relationships? Is it like, if you were to kind of uncover the root?
I didn't even know I had it. So I'm like taking it out of my blind spot. Probably, I don't know if it's relationships, if it's just how much work I would look at it as. I mean, I already work so much.
Yeah.
I do a lot already, but I don't know. Yeah, maybe just fear of the unknown.
Yeah. I love this because sometimes when we can't pinpoint the exact reason why, it can even be a lineage belief.
Wow.
So you might be holding something in your genetic lineage, maybe on the female side, where a certain level of success is okay. So it's sort of like an internal thermostat. And it's not even something that we're consciously aware of. So that could be a contributing factor where, where your lineage actually believes that success means a certain thing. And so when we typically can't pinpoint a certain thing, or we're like, I don't know why I have it, it's here. That's usually an indication that it's not yours, but you're holding it in your being on some level.
Wow. How do you get rid of that?
So
this is so interesting.
I do something called theta healing,
Okay.
and it involves kinesiology. So I would have you muscle test, just like if you go to a chiropractor.
I've done muscle testing before. It's so powerful.
So there's a way to muscle test your subconscious beliefs.
Wow.
And then there's a way to clear it, and then you can check it after to make sure it releases.
You're so cool. Holy shit. This is amazing.
Whenever people like do a power hour session with me or something, they have no idea what they signed up for. And the next thing they know, I'm having them like stand up and they're like, what is happening?
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's really,
I
really
really
wild.
believe in all this type of stuff. Just because I've seen it work for me so much. Like right now I've been in therapy doing, I forget what it's called, EMDR.
Yes.
I think the tapping.
Yeah.
And it's been, wow.
It's
releasing some stuff.
Yes, because when you bring the body into the experience, right, that somatic piece, it's the same thing as working with the subconscious. So our body is the subconscious mind. So oftentimes we can kind of like consciously work really hard to be like, I'm not going to fear success. I'm going to that next level. But every part of your brain and body, which is like 95% of the game, is saying, we're not really safe. We're not really on board with this. So we'll always feel some resistance in that case.
Wow, that's so interesting. I want to do that with you at some point.
You're going to love it.
Because I'm like, I need to release that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's like weird. I cannot wrap my head around like anything of like, why would I fear that?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's usually an indication it's not yours.
Wow, that's so interesting. Wow. What are some other things you've noticed with people that could be holding them back? Like one of the things I was talking about on another podcast was that a lot of females are scared to like own their power. Yeah. Like step into their power. You see that probably a lot.
That is mainly one of the biggest things I help people with. And that usually comes down to like one or two things. Typically, it's that we've witnessed other people abuse their power.
Wow.
So that could usually look like having a narcissistic parent, partner, or even like witnessing it in the workplace. Like you see those bosses who are just like eating everyone's head off. And so as an empathic woman, you're going to be like, yikes, that doesn't feel safe.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like I would rather not take on all my power and avoid that kind of responsibility than accidentally harm someone, because you're connecting power with harm, because that's all you've witnessed.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. One thing that I do that I'm still trying to uncover is I'm very humble. And I think I look at that as such a good thing, like always being humble. So no matter how much success I've gained in my career, I'm always like for an example, one time I had a dream, because I have like people in my company, like a CFO, a COO, and all these different people. But like, I imagined this dream where I was like, had all my employees there, and they were like sitting in a classroom for some reason. And my COO and CFO were like standing at the whiteboard, like talking and like presenting things. And I sat in the classroom with my employees. So I'm like, I constantly like want to humble myself, because I think it's like, I don't know, something maybe I felt like I don't want to be that person that like always thinks I'm better than everyone else. But sometimes it's like to the detriment, because I like bring myself too much on everyone's level to make them feel good. It's powerful in times, because I feel like I'm really good at showing like people that work with me, like the light in them, and helping them see that they could be so big too, because I can come down to their level. So I inspire them.
Yeah.
But then sometimes it's not great for me to always play that very humble, like I need to be.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's interesting.
I feel like my mission in life is helping people have the balance, right?
Yes.
So that's a beautiful asset to have. It's just that when we're stuck in that role, it holds us back from enjoying our own journey, right? Because if you're having to caretake and make sure that you don't trigger anyone and that you don't like outshine anyone, it's honestly exhausting.
Yes.
And you're having to put energy when you're being called to like create such impact and get out there, and then it's like an energy leak, right? So part of that too goes back to the power thing. We often see really egotistical people out there in the world, and we're like, yikes, like, and women are really conditioned to think that humility is like the number one greatest attribute, that it makes you like so innocent. But when you're already like that, we take it too far. And it's okay to be like, fuck yeah, I nailed that. I'm sitting in the front. This is your company. Like, you deserve to be in the spotlight, right? So that takes an enormous amount of reprogramming to go from like multiple angles of being like humility to them being like, I'm going to claim the spotlight. That swing is uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable.
Very.
Something about like owning, like it almost seems selfish or like vain or egotistical. It's all those things that I like have wanted to push away from, but you're right. But then the counter side is, if you don't step into that, you're actually not fulfilling your truest potential, because you're not stepping into the power. You could still be, like you're saying, have a balance and still inwardly be a good person, but own your power.
Yeah, here's how I see it. Like, one of the universal laws is we can't really create true abundance if we're not living in healthy self-interest. And when we're beyond the, am I, stepping over this person's toe, or am I going to make them uncomfortable? It's not that the opposite of humility is cockiness. It's confidence. And when we're confident, we're beyond ourselves. So we're not actually sitting around worrying about what other people think or feel. We're just in true service. Like, we're in that divine alignment with our purpose and our mission. So a lot of times people fear, like, if I lose humility, I'll become cocky. But cockiness is actually just insecurity.
That's so true.
So it's really
I can
just
clearly see that
same thing. It just plays out in a different way. So it's really, people fear that, but that's not what ends up happening when you're truly like not afraid of the spotlight. You don't go walk around going like, look at me, look, you're not even thinking about that. You're just playing that deeper leadership role.
That's so true. Because I've seen people like overcompensate with being confident, and you could tell it's coming from an insecurity of them needing you to think that they're powerful. And like, I can read that. So it's funny that my mind thinks that I would go there, which is like, of course not.
Exactly. Like, true confidence, you're beyond you and you're at your best because you have healthy self-interest, because you're not afraid to like lead the room if you have to. It's really about ultimately service and contribution. But oftentimes our unconscious goes, I would so much rather be like overly humble than that cocky, lack of self-awareness person.
Yes.
So normally there's someone in our life or someone we've dated that has modeled that, and unconsciously we go in the other direction.
Wow, that's so interesting. Wow, you're teaching me a lot.
Oh, good.
Like, because I'm so deep into like learning and self-healing. And so that's why I feel like my podcast always ends up going in that direction.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like we all, like our purpose here is to always evolve and always take these things out of our blind spot and reach our full potential of like this person that you're going to look back on and be like, look how much growth I did. I remember back then I used to not believe in myself, not think I was good enough. And look how much I've achieved. It's like, there's nothing better than that feeling of fulfillment and being proud of the pains that you've gone through and evolved through. And it's not easy stuff to do, but I'm like addicted to it, which thank God. So I feel like I love to inspire people to look at those things, and you clearly do too. But the way that you're speaking about it is like a new, fresh understanding that I haven't heard. So that's what's really cool. That's why you're like showing me very unique ways to look at it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I like to bring maybe a fresh perspective, but something I also want to highlight is like when we have, when you're kind of the old soul and you're on this path of like service and evolution and self-development, like I always like to kind of tell people, first of all, it's brave to get out there and be like, here's my fear and insecurity. I don't want to take that. Like, first of all, that takes a level of courage to be that transparent. And then second of all, the themes that you're working with, like wanting to take the spotlight without, harming other people. If that's the theme and the challenge, that speaks volumes to who you are. Yeah. The fact that we're sitting in this gorgeous home and that didn't go to your head and you don't think you're above people, like that makes you rare in this lifetime. So now it's just creating more of that balance, right? So I always like to highlight to people that like, well, yes, maybe being overly sensitive to other people can be at a detriment. And that's something that we get to learn in this lifetime. It's also that you're such a beautiful person that you care. Whereas so many CEOs and other people like have that narcissistic personality trait. So it's really inspiring for me to see empathic women rise to the top, because that's what I want more than anything. That's my mission, is to see more women claim their power in that way.
Yeah, because you just pointed out something too that I have noticed, and I think that's another thing is like there's some people that have continued to grow in their careers like in this position of power. Like, it's not easy to own a business. It's not easy to lead a company and have employees and all this stuff. And like, I've had a lot of situations with people I've invested so much of myself and my money into that have like taken business from me or done really things that because I care, it does hurt me. So you feel like you have to get more cold. Yeah. And I don't want to be that person. I think that's another fear of like not wanting to have to put up a guard around me to where I don't trust people, because naturally I always trust people until they give me a reason not to. I'm more of that way rather than don't trust anyone until you give me a reason to. I'm not that person. I'm like, I'll trust you all until you show me I can't, So I think that's another thing. You see a lot of people that are very powerful and they're kind of like assholes a little bit in work, and they don't take bullshit from anyone. They're very cutthroat. Like, I'm not that person,
Yeah. And just like you were illuminating in that dream, right, where you're like, I'm in the back and my team's in the front. I also think when it comes to trust, self-trust, hiring people, there's also a balance, right? So sometimes when we're empathic and we have the tendency to think the best in people, we often learn the lesson hard, right? That not everyone's good. There's a lot of fucked up people. People will like take from you that you least expect. And so part of that is just learning the lesson of discernment. Yes. But once we kind of have that self-trust, we can live in more of a balanced state where we're not guarded. We're not protecting our hearts, but we're also allowing people to show us who they are through actions. So I think that there is kind of like a sweet spot, right? Where we don't go around letting everyone in. And we also don't go around so jaded, but we find those kind of gems of people that we let in over time who really show us that they deserve our trust.
And you were so right. You hit the nail on the head, because I realized that too, like this past year, it's trusting yourself. And once you have self-trust with yourself, you're able to navigate the world much more clearly. Yeah.
You're so right. And when we trust ourselves, there's, usually a little bit of gray room, right? Like people will let us down to some extent, but obviously if people are like betraying your trust or steal, like there's a line, right? Where you're like, that's unacceptable.
Yes.
But you can kind of live in that gray space where people can have their human flaws and whatnot, but their overall, the value system matches. And it's really lining up to like that soulmate team, the people you can trust. And it is rarer. It's a smaller circle. Like the more self-trust you have, circles can kind of go through a cleansing, friends, business, and then you find the right ones.
Yeah, I've seen you talk about that. Let's go into that, like the isolation and like what that really means. I would love you to go into that, what you've noticed.
Yeah, so we're kind of taught in this reality, right? That like more friends, more people, always be in a partnership. But what I found in the journey is that anytime I've had like a huge quantum leap or big expansion period, it's the prerequisite is usually isolation.
Wow.
And so what that means is that you just become unwilling to abandon yourself for anyone or anything. And when you're on the path of evolution and growth, there's often this awkward period where you're no longer a match to your current reality and the people in it. Most people get afraid and they just stick with people because it's too uncomfortable. The unknown is too uncomfortable. But when your soul is really going to the next level, often we might have to like vibe alone way longer than we'd hope for. I don't know if you've ever gone through a period of like that, especially when getting,
I was going to say this last like 2 years, I haven't even dated anyone. I've completely, and it sounds crazy, but even kissed someone, not even kissed someone for 2 years. So I went completely isolation in that sense, in like a romantic sense, just pulling back to myself. But I looked at it similar to what you're saying. I was like, I had this like deep knowing that like I could just like go out and settle for someone to give me attention. But there's something so powerful about like owning your energy and increasing your value energetically. I just felt like the universe was aligning me for something better by not just settling to be like, oh, I feel lonely. I did feel feelings of loneliness, but I powered through it. And so it's so powerful to do that.
You nailed it. So it's easy to have friends. It's easy to be in a relationship. It's easy to go get a job. But when you're leveling up and you're called to something higher, there is usually like this awkward, isolating, lonely period. And for some people, it's like when they're really ready to like level up in their love life. For some people, it's like in every area where they like literally might be alone for a while. It just depends how far off we are from our true self. So it's really bringing you back to you, home to you, and being like, what are my top values? And just being unwaveringly not willing to settle.
Yes.
And people think like, oh, go out and date, put yourself out there. I hard disagree. I think it's when you do what you're doing where you're like, I'm going to protect my energy like a fucking newborn baby.
Yes.
No one gets this unless they're like hubby material.
Exactly.
And it works.
And I swear when you do that, like you're sending a message to the universe of what you now know too is your value, and people can feel it. Like people can feel when your energy is special and when you have boundaries and when you have a level of like respect for yourself, and then you're constantly increasing your energy and you're leveling up. And so like then the right person that's even on that level and is worthy of your time now can be aligned with you. But people don't really realize that when you hang out with lower vibes or people that are just hooking up with everyone, it's like energetically lowering your energy.
So spot on. I tell people that the more they heal, the less they'll get hit on.
Yeah.
Because when your energy is saying picky, exclusivity, like it like narrows the field, right?
Yes.
But if you're just like open to whatever, like, yeah, you're gorgeous. Of course you're going to get hit on by people, but you're saying that's not what you're like wanting in your life. And here's the bar and here's the standard. And that usually requires isolation.
That's so true. I have seen that too.
Yeah.
I've noticed that with myself too. Like, and then I had this, one of my friends tell me, she's like, well, your energy is so like not open to just anyone. So then guys are like, whoa. Yeah. It's like a little intimidating, but I do think it eventually aligns you with the right person. So you're not messing around with like any bullshit.
You're right. Most people, they can handle that awkward phase for a little bit, but they'll get uncomfortable, or they'll go back to someone, or they'll think like, oh, like people don't find me as attractive, I'm not getting as hit on, and they'll freak out or get insecure. But you're leaning into it and you're like, yeah, now it's 2 years, the bar just keeps going up. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't wait this long for like anyone. So I absolutely love that you haven't compromised what you want, and you should be picky. And I think that's the way to do it, is just become the most high value version of you with the highest standards, and let someone meet you where you're at.
Because that's when you get the most like special people in this world. Because now you can open the door to like, once you start to value yourself, you're energetically aligned with someone that's also valuing themselves at that level. And then you bring out the best versions of another person because you're meeting them at that place, which is so powerful. Do you see that also with like business? Because I've never really seen it that way. Like, I would love to hear what you think about it with business.
Absolutely. I think our standards for our team, I think our standards for our clients, I think that our standards across the board. But some people, usually what I find is like, some people's biggest themes are either in love or it's in work. So there's a lot of people who just trust with their work, things work out with their work, and they're just not that concerned. But when they really, really want to partner, that's where they have a harder time letting go and just trusting that if they hold their standards, the right person will come in, and vice versa. Sometimes people have amazing partners that just come into their life. It's not a theme that they're meant to like master in this lifetime, but they struggle with work. And so they'll lower the standards. So I find that it's the area that we have the most fear in that we often compromise the quickest in. And so some people obviously can have it in both, but usually one is more predominant.
I always had that issue with problems with partners.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
My whole career.
Yeah, your career is like flying, but then the partners, it's like finding the right one to line up. Exactly.
Yeah. And then also sometimes finding the right team members, like employees to hire, is a hard one.
I agree that it is rare in general to find people who really genuinely care. It's totally possible. And once you do, it's like
the best
the
thing
gold.
Ever.
Yeah, right? It's gold. And with that also means that they have a shadow side and they're imperfect. So it's never like this perfect thing. It's just like their zone of genius and your zone of genius. It's like fucking magic, right?
Yes.
But there's also like, it's the way you communicate, like when things do go south. So it's like, it's never this perfect walk in the park. It's just that your values, their gifts, your gifts, it's just all that can line up insanely well. And I think the same thing with a partner. It's getting someone who contributes to all areas of your life, not just like one or two.
So how does someone go into isolation or do this, like raising their value when it comes to business or finding, even if they were looking for a job or things like that, do they just kind of like, how do they go about creating isolation to like evolve?
Yeah. So the foundation of any manifestation, whether it's a partner, career, anything that you want, is becoming the version of you who already has it. So we often end up in isolation because we've been abandoning ourselves on some level to be connected to other people. So then the universe goes, oh shit, she's neglecting herself. She's abandoning herself. She needs to go on timeout for a minute and get reconnected with herself so she stops abandoning her. And then from that place, and look, there's been periods in my life where it was like years of isolation. Like I was like, if I died, like no one would know. Wow. People actually did thought I died from like the pandemic. I went on this wild isolation period and then like completely shifted my whole entire reality.
And I want to pause you for 1 second because this is like so powerful what you just said. If you're settling in your career, you're settling in your workspace, or you're settling in your relationship, and you know deep down that you're settling, you're abandoning you. And so if you're constantly abandoning you, this isolation is a moment for you to be with her again and remember what she actually wants.
I just got chills. Yeah. You're coming back home to you. And so if you've been in a severe chronic pattern of abandoning yourself, that isolation period is going to be more extreme and longer.
Wow. I feel like I did it in a relationship.
Yeah. So you're probably doing it less in your career, which is why maybe like people came and go, your team, certain members leave or certain friendships leave, but it wasn't so drastic because you had some North Star of like, here's where I'm willing to compromise and here's where I'm not. When we're severely abandoning ourselves and really misaligned, that's when the universe goes, let's give her a reset.
Wow. That's so powerful. That's so true. I literally saw this exactly happen to me.
And you most likely hit a pretty big bottom right before this isolation period. It's rare that things are going well and we're just like, like that things are aligned or like we date. It's usually not when we're coming off of like a great relationship that we end up completely isolated. It's usually some sort of bottom.
Wow.
And our soul is just like, we're done learning the lesson this way.
Wow. That's so powerful. Wow. So true. Wow, that's really cool for people to hear too, and because I feel like it's gonna wake up some parts of them. Like I forget the quote, but my favorite quote is the one. It's like, if you settle for less than you deserve, you'll get less than you settled for. So it's like and another guy, Danny Morell, he's one of my friends now, but he's like a big speaker. He always talks about like settling is an energy. So if you're settling in your love life, that energy is going to leak over to your career and your health and settling in every area, because settling is an energy that you're showing up with. So you might be like, oh no, I'm just settling in my love life. It's like, no, but you're showing up with that energy that you are someone who settles. So you're going to naturally start settling in your career in certain areas and your health. I was like, wow.
That is so true, because when you really start to align with your like higher self and in all areas of your life, when you do, or if you are settling, that feels so fucking uncomfortable. Like you can't ignore it. You wake up, you're thinking about it. But if you're just settling across the board, it just becomes kind of normal, right?
Yes.
It just becomes like, all right, whatever, we're tolerating this, we might as well tolerate that. But when you really elevate everything, and maybe that was happening with your career, like as your career was going up, you were getting so aligned with it that the love life felt like an even more kind of gap, right?
Yes.
So then you're like, it's physically becomes uncomfortable to settle.
Yes. That's so true. That's huge. Yeah. So starting to look at your life and thinking about what areas are you settling in now. And it's scary because it's fear of the unknown to change that. Like, oh, I don't want to lose people. But then another thing I learned in therapy, because she told me I did, I was basically abandoning myself because I was fearful of being abandoned. So then you end up abandoning yourself because you don't want to be abandoned. So then you're doing the same thing back to you. And then, so I started to realize that I was like, oh, wow, we're fearful of the unknown. So we hold on to these things, even though if it's not really serving us, just because we're fearful of being abandoned, but we're really, truly just abandoning ourselves.
Yep. That's exactly what's happening. And that usually plays out when we are holding a wound around power. When we don't feel safe being the rejecter, we'll unconsciously attract situations where we're rejected.
Wow.
Because we don't actually want to be the ones to hurt other people's feelings.
That's me. I'm so that way. I'll hold on to people for so long. Just I care so much about not hurting them, but I'm hurting myself.
You're hurting yourself.
Yes, I'm so that person.
Yeah. So your part
That's what I did in my last relationship.
Yeah. So your evolution is becoming comfortable being the rejector.
Yes.
Like telling people no, or being like, I don't. I know.
Scary.
It can feel like you're dying.
Yeah.
When you're so empathic and caring, it is probably the most uncomfortable feeling ever. However, being able to reject people is loving. Because if we're not really aligned with them and we're just dragging people along, we end up wasting their time.
So it's not true love and care.
Yeah, it's not true love and
It's
care.
like I'm just thinking like I don't want to hurt them.
Right.
And then I try to talk myself into being like, no, it's fine.
Yes.
Because I don't want to hurt them.
Fine.
Yeah,
exactly. And then it unconsciously ends up hurting them because you don't actually want to be there.
Yes, that's so powerful. And then it leads into karma.
Oh yeah.
And that's a whole nother world that I learned about too, is like if you're holding, like some people are settling in relationships, not truly happy, and they know they're not happy and they know they should leave. And this was a powerful thing that I also learned, is like, that's a karmic bond now. And that if you know that you shouldn't be with someone and you're wasting their life, you're going to bring yourself karma because it's not right.
Yes, totally. And the flip side of karma can be that karma can be healing. So if the karmic pattern that you've been in is overly taking responsibility for others' feelings to the point where you're harming yourself, part of the karma in this lifetime isn't to continue to learn compassion and selflessness, which we're kind of taught that's the ultimate spiritual thing, but not for someone who's already mastered that.
Wow.
Like you have that to such far extreme that you're now ready to master your power in this lifetime, feeling safe rejecting people, feeling safe with that level of, connection to yourself. And it's really like
it's trusting in you.
Yeah.
What were you going to say about your throat?
It's opening up the throat chakra because that thing's usually jammed shut.
Oh my gosh. I have an issue with my throat chakra so badly. Sorry, you're blowing my mind. I was so meant to meet with you because I'm like, okay, so I'm finding out, I'm like diving into, I have thyroid imbalance.
So
I have the TMJ.
Oh yeah.
And then I'm diving into both of these, and it comes from the root issue is the throat chakra.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm going to get real woo-woo and weird
love
with
this.
you
Go
for
ahead.
a second. So when you're naturally have these healing gifts, right? The archetype of your being and your soul, there's often a lot of like past life karma in particular for people who have healing nature around being like persecuted. And so that's like a real thing that healers can kind of carry in their throat chakra.
Wow.
So that can come from like a past life thing. It can also probably played out earlier on in life where maybe it wasn't safe for you to speak up, or like you witnessed people being harmed or abused for speaking up. That kind of thing can play out in smaller degrees or larger degrees.
It didn't happen like that for me. Like my parents, I could speak up and stuff. So it had to have been a past life.
Yeah. It's usually something like early on.
Because that's why it was so hard for me to figure it out. I'm like, how do I have throat chakra? I'm so like, I talk, I'm expressive. I'm like, so I was like, so weird that I was like, is it a throat chakra? But then I've been really learning about it more. So that's interesting.
And I'm glad you highlighted that because not everything comes down to like childhood trauma. Not everything comes down to like how you felt as a kid. Sometimes it's like such a deeper carryover energy that we're dealing with that we can't even see in this lifetime. So I'm really glad you illuminated that because anytime that we're really struggling with something and it's not really like connected to a specific circumstance or person in this lifetime, it's usually a carryover energy. So you probably went through lifetimes of persecution. Also, when it's part of our purpose and our gift, it's usually a thing that we struggle with the most.
Wow.
And in severe cases, that it will start to play out on a physical level.
Yes, it has.
So
It has.
yeah, your body's like, time to speak.
And it's funny because I keep seeing butterflies everywhere. And I was talking to my sister, I'm like, I keep seeing butterflies everywhere. And she's like someone came to me and they had a butterfly tattoo on their neck.
Whoa.
This other girl came into my office. She had a butterfly right here. And I was like, why do I keep seeing butterflies? She's like, transformation. And I've been working on this throat chakra thing. Yeah.
Part of activating this is getting really messy, which can be so uncomfortable and feel so destabilizing and feel really unsafe. So part of getting messy is not always saying the perfect thing to people. If you like, if someone rubs you the wrong way or says something wrong, like learning to speak up to them in the most messy like way.
Wow.
And take that pressure off of ourselves. So I usually find that is the first step, is just being like, I'm not willing to live with resentment. Because when we are never speaking up and we're abandoning ourselves, we end up exhausted. We have health problems. It shows up physically. And we just end up really resentful deep down. Even though it doesn't come out that way, there's usually resentment running on some level.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a part of me that is always fearful of making the wrong decision. So when I know someone's really good and I don't want to hurt them, I don't want to be wrong because I hold on to things way too long. I like care too much. So then I like, if I said the wrong thing, for an example, or hurt someone, it will weigh on me for so long and then I'll regret it and be like, why did I do that? And like, I'll hurt myself more over it. So I think I'm fearful of making the wrong decision.
That's where I was like, we got to get messier, because that is like the number one thing. And usually what that means is that there's like toxic guilt running and toxic shame running that looks like I can't be wrong, or if I'm wrong, something bad will happen.
Wow.
So that's usually some internalized form of excessive guilt trying to keep you in this like really confined role. And so part of it is actually letting yourself feel more guilty.
Wow.
Like letting you sit with guilt and not letting the guilt manipulate you to say the perfect thing or to not speak up.
Wow.
So people will come to me and they're like, I just set this boundary. I've never felt so bad in my life. I feel like I'm dying. I feel like I just did the worst thing. I'm like, fuck yeah. Like,
Wow.
we're going to celebrate this. You're going to sit with the guilt. You're going to be with the guilt. You're going to like have a party with the guilt, and you're not going to let it like manipulate you back into that small role.
Wow. Because you're being unapologetically yourself, right?
Yeah. And what it is that guilt is there in healthy doses. Shame is there. And it's all there to support us, right? So like if we do something bad, like it's good to have a conscience, right? It's just that when we're so extreme with like what we're allowed to do and not allowed to do, like if you're never allowed to hurt someone's feelings, that's like impossible, right?
Yes, that's so true.
So it's like that guilt isn't even really helping you. It's actually hindering you. So we just want to have a healthy balance of guilt in our being.
That makes sense. Yeah, you need to have it a little bit to like be human and to live life authentically based off your own needs and not always having to think of other people, because then you're not serving yourself.
Also, a lot of people have way more thicker skin than we realize.
Wow.
So a lot of people aren't as empathic and sensitive. A lot of people aren't.
Yeah, I'm like heavily an empath, like uncomfortable amounts.
Yeah, it can feel very daunting. And usually it's that when we have like with highly, highly, highly empathic people, there's a gift inside of there.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I know.
It's been exhausting.
Yeah, no. There's usually a divine timing
Yes.
where that gift gets channeled and then it comes into such balance.
Oh, okay, cool.
And part of that is that we like get comfortable having a little inner bitch that can come out and like have our back when we need it.
Yes.
But most of us will always be more gentle, loving beings, but we also need to have like a little inner bitch that can like
It's
our
interesting too, because my empathy has skyrocketed over the last like 3 years. Like even like 7 years ago, I would have never even known I was an empath, or like I had that level of sensitivity towards others. So it's interesting. People could discover it later, like things can happen in your life and then trigger it. And now it's gotten really strong. Wow. So like I can literally like look at someone in a restaurant and like cry if like I felt like they're not, like I saw this old woman the other day like trying to eat, and I'm like crying like 2 seconds. So I'm like that level of empathy. I can feel that she like was having a hard time eating her food, and like makes me want to cry now. But I'm like so empathetic, and it's beautiful in those ways because you can feel so strongly. But in other ways, it's so like exhausting because especially with clients, like I have so many people that work with me that I want to do right by, but it's a lot of pressure when you're an empath because you take on people's emotions and like, things that they're going through. It's a lot. It's heavy.
Yeah, exactly. And so part of what you'll find in your journey is there's going to become some sort of channel or something's going to guide you somewhere in your being. There's a gift in here. And it could look like two things. Usually it's like we hit a bottom and we're like, I literally have to start speaking up. My jaw is locked. My throat is like I physically have to start awakening this thing because otherwise I'm going to end up having a health problem.
Yes.
The other form is that you come into some kind of divine timing and you're already on your path, but there will be a way for you to channel that empathy where it becomes way more of an asset than a detriment. And you'll get way more comfortable with like that shadow side or that part of you that like has your back, and you'll feel less responsible for other people's emotions. Part of it could also be kind of connecting when that turning point happened a couple years ago. Like what, maybe if there was a specific event or something that happened, it could be going back and kind of reprogramming your perspective around that situation.
Yeah, that's huge. That's important too, for sure. Yeah, that's so interesting. Wow, you probably help so many women to get so many breakthroughs.
This is like, I work with highly empathic people that like exactly the themes and things that you've mentioned is sort of like my zone.
Yeah. And there's so many women and even men, I think, that don't speak up in the workplace or don't align with their true like feelings or what they truly want, and kind of just play small a lot. So I feel like it's a huge thing in general to help with, to like constantly make those baby steps to step into your power, like these, even if they're small.
you're spot on. And it's like slowly raising your capacity for discomfort, slowly not taking on so much responsibility around other people's feelings. And what you'll find is like, it just gets so much easier.
Wow.
And me and my team, we kind of have this like thing where we're like, it's better to like say something a little bit messy and apologize to each other than hold something in, because we want to work together for the long run. We want to be in it for life. We want to build this incredible brand that touches so many people's lives. And we're like, we know that in order to do that, we're going to have really uncomfortable, hard conversations on a regular basis.
Yes.
So we will literally call each other and be like, hey, I don't want to hold on to this resentment. Let me just get it out. And
That's
like,
good.
we will practice having hard conversations with each other. I'm like, hey, that was like a little harsh. I'm going to need you to like dial that back a bit. And we're like, cool. So part
That's
of
great.
it is normalizing having hard conversations, because we often think that like, if we have a hard conversation, it's going to ruin the connection. So part of it is seeing as something that enhances the connection.
Yes, because it does.
It does.
It makes you so much closer when you, and there's this movie, I always talk about it now because it's so good, but it like the message was so good, but it's called Time Freak. And it's basically this guy, he meets this girl that he like falls in love with, and then he was so in love, and then she ends up leaving him because they had like an argument or something. So he made like a time machine to go back in time and not get in the argument, and then they stayed together. But then anytime there was a little argument, he went back, fixed it, moved forward, and like kept fixing every single thing. And it flashed forward to like years later in the future, and like she just looked like so empty sitting with him, and she's like, I don't, and he's like, what's wrong, and she's like, you're perfect, but like I'm just not happy. And it's like, not arguing doesn't make you, it doesn't make you closer, it doesn't make you happy, it doesn't make you fulfilled. So it's about how you disagree and how you have conflict, and that actually brings you closer when you handle it together.
Wow.
So it was really powerful. I was like, wow.
That gave me chills.
Yeah.
I literally love that. And that's such a beautiful analogy. I think human nature, we're just so designed to like run away from hard things or painful emotions. But actually, that's like the most beautiful part about being human. And it's also a really good filtering system, right? Like if someone can't have a mature, loving, direct conversation around like hurt feelings or around a problem, immediately there's no room, right? So being courageous enough to bring something forward to someone is going to highlight immediately if that person's capable of meeting you where you're at and worth having in your life. There's been friends where I've had the courage to like speak up to them and say something to their face, and then they've gone talk shit behind my back. And I'm like, cool, thank you for showing me that. I can't work with that. Like that's not someone I want to continue to have in my life. So it kind of is a beautiful filtering process as well.
Yes, that's so true.
You know?
I know there's like, I've had situations like that too, because I'll always, I can't be fake and I can't be a good friend if I'm holding this on.
Totally.
We have to address it. Yes. Otherwise, I'm never going to allow myself to be close with you. I'm going to have a wall up, and I don't want to feel that way with my friends. Yeah. So it's so important to address rather than holding all these things on, because you're just hurting yourself.
Do you find it's easier to communicate those hard conversations and speak up with your friends than it is like at work or
definitely
in love life?
With friends is the easiest. I do have it with team members and people that it's when I care about you way too much as like a romantic partner. It's really hard for me because now I can feel them so much, and I don't want to disappoint them, because you get to a place where you guys are both looking at each other at a certain way, and you don't want to disappoint the way they looked at you or be, you know, like you don't want to like be not what they thought you would be. Yeah. You know, you want to rise up to the occasion of the way they look at you. Yes. And so that's hard. And then with certain, definitely with certain team members, I get to that place. It's like once I care about you a lot, it's harder for me, because now I like know you so well, and I don't want to disappoint you. Whereas it's easier if I have more of a distance.
Yeah, and I think that can be a little bit of like the shadow side of being successful and in the spotlight. Like maybe people automatically might pedestal you a little bit or put you in a certain category, and then maybe there's this internal expectation that you put on yourself, not even maybe that consciously, or maybe it's just that when you really care about people, you are overly not wanting to disappoint them or burden them. Did you ever feel like your exes or people you date would put an unrealistic expectation on you? Because sometimes what it is that people are doing, like when you're empathic, we have the tendency to take on too much responsibility when other people are actually doing things to us, that's their responsibility. So if a partner is projecting too much expectation on you, it could also have been that dynamic. And part of your not wanting to disappointment could have been not wanting to disappoint them could have been their projection of some unrealistic expectation on you. Does that resonate?
I had that with my dad. My dad had an unrealistic expectation of me to like, and it served me in a lot of ways because he like, you know, wanted always, nothing was ever fully good enough. Like we always needed to do more and more and more. So his expectation was so high of like what he wanted me and my sister to achieve and be. So I definitely got it from him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So then I have had attracted it in partners.
Yeah.
Because then you would try kind of align with dating your dad.
Yep. And then it's like never enough for them, never enough. And then it's feeding that let me do more kind of pattern.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. It all ties back.
It totally does. And maybe part of your isolation period is letting yourself off the hook. Mm-hmm. Because you're not there to be perfect. Mm-hmm. And that's exhausting.
Mm-hmm. I learned that with my therapist. She was like, what pedestal are you standing on? And like, she's like, and then we did that, like the EMDR, and she was like tapping, and then I could just feel that it was so heavy because I've carried this, like, I've stood on this pedestal of what my dad wanted me to be since I was so young that it felt like I couldn't even remember the first time I took that on. And so that's what's crazy is when she has you like think back, I'm like, I don't even know, I had to have taken on so young.
Yeah, you're like straight out the womb. I was on that pedestal, you know?
Yeah. So it's like, it was scary. She's like, now you can like step off of it. And it's like scary to like let go of like all this pressure that aren't even my like thoughts. That it's like, are they even serving me? Are these even things I want, or am I just doing this to serve someone else? It's wild. And then you're like, who even am I anymore?
Yeah,
Who am I and what do I want?
Yes.
It's crazy.
That's like the soul waking up and being like, where am I really wanting to go in this lifetime?
Yeah.
And it's really freeing when you don't have to be perfect and when you can just let people perceive whatever they want of you. That is like a true freedom and takes effort to kind of get to that place.
For sure. So I'd want to hear about your path. You've had a very inspiring like journey to get to where you are, and I know you've been through a lot, right?
Yes.
And so I'd love to have you share that if you don't mind.
Yeah, I feel like I've always had a really strange life. Like I always was going down these weird roads and I'm like, why? How did I end up here? Yeah. And then later in life, now that I've like worked with so many people, I'm like, oh, this all makes sense. I was really like kind of living these paths to understand and give people like a roadmap to where they're going. Wow. But I got sober really young. I've never had a legal drink.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like born with a birthmark on my face. So I was one of the first people to undergo all these like surgeries as a kid. Wow. So I just had these like when most people be like running around playing, it's not that I didn't do that too, but I was like visibly like undergoing surgeries, or when everyone was partying, I was getting sober, or later, even in my like mid-20s, when everyone's careers were taking off, I got a neurological disease. So I was like dead in bed. So I just had this like kind of like, whoa, these weird paths. And then in hindsight, I'm like, oh, this was all for my greater understanding of like the empath, you know, journey and what it takes to kind of move out of survival. So my soul picked all these like crazy survival themes, you know, to kind of go through to teach people how to move out of that.
Wow.
So yeah, I had my own like, you know, physical stuff, addictions, that kind of thing, visibility wounds, all that. So it was like a lot of my life was just overcoming to create this sort of brand and business that has kind of just like skyrocketed over this last year. So
wow, that's so powerful, because if you don't actually go through it, you can't truly help someone, because you can't meet them where they like resonate with them.
It's so, I have never had someone come to me in the history of my career, and I've been working with people since I've been like 20. I was like coaching and mentoring my entire life, basically.
Wow, that's so cool.
Different capacities. Yeah, I've never sat in front of someone and been like, I don't know how to help you, or I don't know how to navigate this specific theme. So it's such a blessing looking back, and it's one of those things where I'm like, wouldn't change a thing. But in certain periods, I was like, what the hell is going on in my life? Like, how am I getting so far out of like left field. But
And that would have probably been scary during that time. I feel like I would have been pretty scared about like why, and then also hard to not go into victim mode of like, why is this happening to me and all this stuff going through that. But it probably is a good message for people that might have things they're going through of like, this could be serving you for something greater.
Totally. So I think anytime we get hit with a diagnosis or someone passes away in our life or we go through a really hard time, it's so okay to feel a little bit victimized by it. Like shit happens sometimes that we're just like, this, what the fuck was that? Right. But then what?
Yeah.
Like we have a choice, right? It's like, are we going to stay in that forever? Or are we going to take this shit and turn it into gold? Or what are we going to do about it? And that's where I feel like I really excel. Like you can bring me shit and I'll somehow turn it in. And I just have done that my whole life.
That's amazing.
But it was like a muscle that gets developed from those circumstances. But you're right. There's usually some higher lesson happening. We can't always see it in the moment, but you're right. I have now gotten to a point where if something weird goes, I'm like, cool, like what's going to come out of this?
Wow.
But it took sort of a lifetime of understanding that later on.
Yes, that's so true. And that's powerful to be able to look at a problem and be like, okay, what is this going to teach me? I did get to a place with that with my healing stuff. Like I get so excited when someone points out like something that I could evolve, or like even hearing more about the points that you've said. It gets so exciting to learn and develop that part of me, or get it out of my blind spot and be like, okay, this is something I need to evolve to next. So you get kind of like into it and like you use it as a strength and a tool to get to where you need to be.
You're spot on, because most of the time when something crazy happens in our life, it's like a wake up. It's trying to shift something of us. If we just pretend like we're in a video game, it's like, okay, well, this challenge or this theme or this trauma is here to like evolve my soul. And this is the path I chose to learn and evolve. And as we go up in consciousness, it does get easier. Like it's less shocking when we really start to master the themes. It does get a lot gentler. But in the beginning, it can be kind of crazy at times, and it takes a while to build that muscle of being like, this is happening for me. Like this is totally going to be the thing that's going to like catapult my career or whatever it is. You kind of have to like train your mind to see it that way. Otherwise we can get stuck in those lessons for way longer than we want to be stuck for.
You're so powerful and you're so amazing. It's been so lovely talking to you. I would love you to share people where they can find you, and then tell them about your coaching.
Yeah. So my website is herunapologeticsuccess.com, but my Instagram is Margot Miller Inc. So you can find me at either one of those.
Yeah, you're so amazing. Thank you so much. It's been so powerful getting to know you, and I want to come to one of your coaching classes. So hopefully inspire other people too. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Oh, so sweet.
Lovely.
So sweet. That was really fun.
I love you all so very much, and thank you so much for listening. It means so much to me when you guys subscribe, when you comment. My heart melts. I love responding to all of you guys. And as you know, I come back every week on Tuesday, so I'll see you there. Feel free to share this episode with anyone that you feel like this would help. And I love you all, my $1 billion babies.